as though it were putty, for a range of 20 feet. Ranson played the beam back and forth along the stairs, cutting them down to a smooth ramp, which the attackers would have to climb before they could get to him. One of them tried to leap the last few levels before Ranson could cut them, but he sliced the man in two through the chest. The separate parts of the man's body fell and rolled back to the untouched levels below. He had not had time to utter even a cry of pain. For a time now, there was complete silence in the wind. Ranson could see the inert legs of the last attacker projecting out over the edge of the third level down, and undoubtedly the others saw them too. They were hesitating now, unsure of themselves. Ranson stayed pressed to the stone wall, waiting. The wind whipped with a rising moan through the upper reaches of the building. Another of the men slipped over the edge of the massive stairs, hugging the deeper darkness at the side of the stair wall, and slowly inched his way up the newly flattened ramp. Ranson watched him coldly, through a grey haze of fury that was yet tinged with despair. What use was all this, the killing, the blood, the sweat and pain? It disgusted him, yet by its perverse senselessness it angered him too. He cut a swath through the crawling man, through head and neck and back. A gory, shell-like hulk slid back to the foot of the ramp. And abruptly the remaining men broke and ran. One of them rose and stumbled down the steep levels of the stairs, heedless of his exposure. With a shock, Ranson saw that it was René Malholm. Another followed, and another. There were almost a dozen of them on the stairs. They all broke and ran. Ranson sent one beam after them, biting a depression into the rock wall beside them. Then they were gone. Ranson moved back from the head of the stairs and leaned wearily against the stone. His left arm was beginning to tingle with returning circulation now. He rubbed it absently with his good hand and wondered if they would try the sheer walls on the other side of the temple. He had scaled one of those ancient walls, but would they try it? Certainly they stood little chance of coming up the stairs, unless they gathered for a concerted rush. And who would lead such a suicidal attack? These men were vicious, but they valued their lives too. Yet he couldn't watch the black walls. Leaving the stairwell unguarded would be the most dangerous course of all. In a few minutes the hand radio, forgotten on the stone floor beside him, flashed an intermittent light which caught his eye in the dusk. That would be Manning. Ranson slid the radio over to the head of the stairs and switched on there, keeping an eye on the stairwell. "Lee, do you hear me?" "I hear you." His voice was low and bitter. "I'm coming in to talk. Hold your goddamn fire." "Why should I?" said Ranson. "Because I'm bringing Mara with me. It's too bad you don't trust me, Lee. But if that's the way you want it, I won't trust you either." "That's a good idea," he said, and switched off. Almost immediately he saw them come out from behind the cover of a fallen wall across the dusty street. Mara walked in front of Manning. Her head was high, her face almost expressionless. The cold wind threw dust against their legs as they crossed the open space to the base of the steps. Ranson stood motionless watching them come up. Manning still had his two stunners, but they were in his holsters. He kept behind the girl all the way, pausing before pushing her up the open ramp at the top, then moving even more closely behind her. Ranson stood with the disintegrator hanging loosely in one hand at his side. On the colonnade, Manning gripped the girl by her undamaged arm. He nodded to one of the doorways into the temple, and Ranson preceded him inside. As they entered, Manning lit a hand light and set it on the floor. The room was thrown into stark relief, the shadows of the motionless aliens striking the walls and ceiling with an almost physical harshness. Manning paused a moment to look at the herlogy and at the altar across the room. "We can hear each other in here," he said at last. "What do you want?" said Ranson. There was cool hatred in his voice, and the knife scar on his forehead was a dark snake line in the hard glare of the hand light. Manning shrugged a bit too quickly. He was nervous. I want you out of here, Lee, and I'm not accepting any argument this time. Ranson looked at Mara, staring helplessly in the older man's grip. He glanced down at the disintegrator in his hand. Manning drew one of his stunners quickly and trained it at Ranson's face. I said no arguments. Put the weapon down, Lee. Ranson couldn't take a shot at the man with Mara in front of him. He carefully laid the disintegrator on the floor. Slide it over here. Ranson kicked it across the floor. Manning bent and picked it up, returning the stunner to its holster, and held the disintegrator on him. That's better. Now we can avoid arguments, right, Lee? You've always liked peaceful settlements, haven't you? Ranson glared at him but didn't say anything. He walked slowly into the center of the room, among the Hurlogy. They paid no attention. Lee, he's going to kill them, Mara burst out. Ranson was standing now next to the interpreter. The handlight which Manning had set on the floor across the room was trained upwards, and the interpreter was still in the darkness. He lowered his head, as if in thought, and switched on the machine with his foot. Is that true, Manning? Are you going to kill them? His voice was loud and it echoed from the walls. I can't trust them, Manning said, his voice automatically growing louder in response to Ranson's own. He stepped forward, pushing Mara in front of him. They're not human, Lee. You keep forgetting that for some reason. Think of it as clearing the area of hostile native animal life. That comes under the duty of a governor now, doesn't it? And what about the men outside? Did you put it that way to them? They do what I say, Manning snapped. They don't give a damn who they kill. There's going to be fighting here, whether it's against Hurlogy or between the townsmen. As governor, I'd rather they took it all out on the horses here. Domestic tranquility, shall we say. He was smiling now. He had everything in control. So that's your purpose, Ranson said. There was anger in his voice, feigned or real, perhaps both. But his voice rose still higher. Is butchery your only goal in life, Manning? Manning stepped toward him again, his eyes narrowing. Butchery? It's better than no purpose at all. Lee, it'll get me off these damn outworlds eventually, if I'm a good enough butcher. And I mean to be, Lee. I mean to be. Ranson turned his back on the man in contempt and walked past Hurong to the base of the ancient altar. He looked up at the Eye of Kor, dim now, when not in use. He turned. Is it better, Manning? Does it give you a right to live while you slaughter the Hurlogy? Manning cursed under his breath and took a quick step towards Ranson. His hard black shadow leaped up the wall. Yes, it gives me any right I can take. It happened quickly. Manning was now beside the massive figure of the alien, Hurong. In his anger, he had loosened his grip on Mara. He raised the disintegrator towards Ranson, and Hurong's huge fist smashed it from his hand. Manning never knew what hit him. Before he had even realized that the disintegrator was gone, Hurong had him. One heavy hand circled his throat, the other gripped his shoulder. The alien lifted him viciously and broke him like a stick. Ranson could almost hear the man's neck break, so final was that twist of the alien's hands. Hurong lifted the lifeless body above his head and hurled it to the floor with such force that the man's head was stoved in and his body lay twisted and motionless where it fell. Afterwards there was silence in the room, save for the distant sound of the wind against the building outside. Hurong stood looking down at the broken body at his feet, his expression as unfathomable as it had ever been. Mara stared in shocked silence at the alien. Ranson walked slowly to the mic lying beside the interpreter. He raised it. You can move quickly, old leather, when there's reason for it, he said. Hurong turned his head to him and silently dipped it to one side. Ranson lifted the broken form of Manning's body and carried it out to the top of the steps leading down from the temple. Mara went with him, carrying the handlight. It fell harshly on Manning's crushed